Yeah, Kurt, we're just talking. A couple pumps are out, huh?
Yeah, what we have is some of the aeration motors are out, and the aeration motors are motors that inject air down into a diffuser, and you can see a couple. There's one there on that side of the lake, and there's another one here, but there's normally 4 more. One of them single horsepower motors that's located next to the pool hut over there is actually out, and we need to get that repaired as soon as we can. Plus, the board and the Lake Management Committee need to understand is that these are rotary vane type of motors, which are designed for this purpose and work very, very well, but they need to be maintained, and at least every year, sometimes twice a year, they need to have those rotary vanes replaced because they wear down. They're made of glass and they basically wear out, and it's a very simple process to replace these vanes, but it needs to be done.
Okay.
It's very much just the maintenance, you know, you're changing oil in your car, same idea. And every year about January, we like to do it because it's a slower time of the year. Plus, if by the time the board approves it and we get it actually in, then it's the start of summer, and then we find that we can go throughout the whole summer without having a problem. But problems do occur. These things are glass. They can break, and once they do that, it can jam the motor. But sometimes it just falls down, and then we get lucky. But the maintenance on it, it's a $300–400 price tag as opposed to a $1,400 price tag to replace the motor.
Okay.
Of motors around the lake, you have circulation motors and you have aeration motors.
Okay.
And they're totally separate. We just saw over here the circulation motor.
Okay.
Those are the glorified pool motors.
Right. And then the ones that you're pointing out that you see the bubbles, those are the aeration pumps?
That's the aeration, right. And that's a very major function to this lake. And the reason is those bubbles are coming from a diffuser that's at the bottom of the lake. As those bubbles come to the surface, it creates what we term as an upwelling. And what that is the water that is following those bubbles up need to be replaced, and it takes the top water and replaces it down below. That top water is very high in oxygen because that's where the majority of your oxygen exchanges for your lake is at the top. And it brings that oxygenated water down to the bottom where your sediment is, because that's where your bacteria is. Mm-hmm. And your bacteria is what utilizes oxygen, as do the fish, but the bacteria utilize that oxygen to break down all your organics and the ammonia that is secreted by the fish, because ammonia to fish is very toxic. It needs to be oxygenized into nitrates and nitrates that is an untoxic form of ammonia.
So that's a big necessity. Those are
yes,
the cornerstones.
Plus it also keeps the ambient water temperature lower, because in the summertime, if you have no water movement, you get what is termed as the thermocline, which is very hot water and very cold water. And if you don't have any circulation, then that hot water is going to increase the planktonic algae growth.
Do you have, obviously we could count, but how many of these aeration pumps are in the lake here?
I believe there's 6.
Okay. And then a couple of them you said are out.
Yes.
This one obviously right here at the...
Well, that's a circulation motor.
The one here? There's
one?
Right.
But it stems, there's a box, there's a kind of a gray-green box that we can take a look at.
Okay.
There's 2 motors in each of the boxes, and each motor operates 4 heads. So out of one box, you're operating 8 heads out of that.
Okay. Okay, we're looking at this electrical box right off the point by the rocks by the park, and we noticed that the lid is broken, needs replacement, and the electrical connections don't look watertight. So you're talking about these lily pads here, huh?
Yeah. These lily pads serve a number of different functions, and one is to soak up the nutrients that are coming into this lake. I talked a little bit about reducing the amount of runoff that we're getting into the lake, which has a lot of nutrients in it, is that the plants here soak up nutrients just like terrestrial plants. It's very vital because if we don't have nutrient being soaked up by the lilies, then the first thing that wants to grow is planktonic algae, and that's where we get the green water, the green pea soup looking water. So we need these plants to reduce the amount of nutrients that are into the water so it outcompetes the planktonic algae and you get clear water.
You might want to go over again while you're filming the aspects of the nest.
The pebbles.
Pebbles.
Yeah, we got the
So these pebbles are put here for a reason. They're there
Yes,
purposely.
they're there for a reason, and the reason is because it provides a spawning area for the bass and the bluegill, because bass build nests and they fan an area to get all the sedimentation off the rocks so the egg can sit up above the sedimentation, so water, which has air in it, can get all the way around the egg and keep that egg oxygenated so it develops properly.
Now I noticed I'm not too sure if the whole perimeter of the lake has the pebbles. Is that purposely done that way, or
There's some here and at the other end.
Yes.
Is that
Yes. That you want multiple spawning areas.
for more than just this area? Because I
Yes.
know visibly you could see many of the bluegill
Mhm.
and bass here during the spawning season.
There's a lot on the other
as
side.
well as the very shallows at the the west end of the
Yeah.
lake.
Again, they want shallow areas because that water is warm, it increases metabolic rate, and so you get a much more viable egg, and more eggs will hatch from that.
So do you believe there's enough physical environment that we have currently with these pebbles
For right now,
them to
but what my concern is that all this runoff that we're getting into is starting to put a layer of sediment on there that they're not going to be able to get off, and then we're going to have less spawning.
Now, is there anything that we can do to get the sediment out of the lake? I mean,
Well,
I'm talking about preventing it going in, but once it's there, is there anything that you can do to get it
Other
out?
than dredging, no.
That's it.
Yep.
So we got to be very careful.
Yes, and it's going to be
Very
it'll be
expensive.
Very expensive.
Very
yes.
expensive if we continue.
Yes. And that leads me into, I talked about the reducing the nutrients, and the reason is because we don't want a lot of planktonic algae blooms, because the only way we can control algae is with copper. That is the only algicide that we can use. And copper is a metal. It doesn't go away. The more you use it, the more it gets deposited onto the sediment. And if by chance, anytime we need to dredge areas, the first thing they're going to do is do a toxicology study on that sediment. And if it has too much copper in it, it can be considered toxic waste. And then you have the problem, you just can't dump it anywhere. You've got to go to a toxic waste facility, which increases the price about tenfold. So, as a maintenance company, we don't like to use a lot of chemicals out here. And that's why we try to set up this lake as a natural habitat where it tends to take care of itself more. But if we have all this runoff into the lake and all this nutrients in here, then we need more lilies, we need more pondweed. And I know that we're trying to control the pondweed, because once the pondweed gets up to the surface, then we start getting filamentous algae on it. And then we have to use herbicides in the lake to suppress the pondweed that is growing in the lake. So the less nutrients that is coming into the lake, the less pondweed you're going to have, the less filamentous algae and planktonic algae you're going to have.